So I just had the GFX 100S for about 3 weeks, this time with the 23mm and the 250mm lenses, which means I'm sitting on about 3 weeks of backlog of images to edit. So I wanted to do a quicker video just to get you guys some content while I finish up the rest. And I came up with comparing the GF250 versus the XF50-140mm. Primarily I'm an X-Series shooter, which is most likely going to change soon, but one of the lenses I own is the 50-140, and it is a phenomenal lens. Megapixels aside from the X-Series to the GFX system, I would like to compare the bokeh and the sharpness of the lenses. Basically the common ground they have is the 200mm focal length. The 50-140 at 140mm is a 200 equivalent, and the 250 prime is literally a 200mm equivalent. So I thought it'd be pretty interesting to compare the two and maybe play a bit of a guessing game, see if you can figure out which lens is which, as they both have really great bokeh. Which one is better? Well, that we will determine by the end of the video. Also, I'm gonna get more into the 250mm later, but I'm gonna do a mega review video on that, one of the massive like 25-minute videos or around that time. So we'll get heavy into that lens and my thoughts of it. But I mean, one of the main things is that it's just a really big lens. It's basically the size of my forearm with the lens hood, and with it being so big, it's discouraging to kind of walk around with it. It kind of put me off the whole time I had it. I only wanted to use that lens during the day, and I didn't have a ton of time to shoot during the day. So for the first 2 weeks, I didn't use it a ton. Also, I don't really like using f4 lenses at night. So basically, I did go out a few times, a few dedicated times, only using that lens. And I think it'll be interesting to kind of compare these two. So I'm gonna walk you through 2 segments. One, I walked around Crown Heights and I specifically took the exact same shot of each lens. I also did a few kind of studio shots, static subjects, and we'll play the guessing game, see which one's which, and then we'll take a look at some dog photography, because I know you guys like that. And yeah, I'm gonna stop rambling, let's get into it. So here we are in Lightroom. I have 2 images pulled up, one taken with the 250, one with the 50-140. So as you can see, they're pretty similar. They're not 100% lined up, but this was in the real world, so much harder to line up than a studio shot. So also this was handheld too. So that being said, take a look at both images, and I'll give you a couple seconds to pick which one you think is the GFX and which one is the X-Series. All right, so I will turn on the info. And we have the GFX on the right. So at a quick glance, we can see that the bokeh is definitely a bit smoother on the GFX. It looks like, for example, despite the GFX being an f4 versus a 2.8 on the X-Series, it looks like the GFX is literally at a lower aperture than the X-Series. Let's zoom in a little bit. I'm going to turn off the compare. All right, so this is pretty, this is decently close. And I think if we, like let's see, okay, so the X-Series is at 50%, the GFX is at 25%. So if we start to look at things in the background, this pole sticking up looks pretty similar. The no standing sign is definitely a bit more blurred in the GFX version. The one-way sign is also more of it looks to be in focus, which is definitely one of the which is definitely a medium format. perk of the larger sensor. Just gonna move this over a little bit so we can see the tree. The tree looks a little bit softer in the X-Series version. Obviously, more of the image is a bit sharper in the GFX version. I'm not gonna hardcore touch on which has, you know, the X-Series does not have as many megapixels, so I'm not going to hardcore push that. But, you know, if we start to zoom in just a little bit further, maybe at 100% on the X-Series, I think that's pretty fair. You know, it's kind of pretty difficult to choose a winner here. You know, you definitely have a decent amount of, you know, subject in focus on both. They kind of look identical. The biggest difference to me is that the background on the GFX is definitely smoother. But otherwise, you're pretty much a toss-up. Definitely have less grain on the GFX. Here, this looks very pixelated and grainy, but we are at 100% on the X-Series and 50 on the GFX. So let's see, let's also zoom in on this tree. So here, definitely you see a massive difference on the GFX. You get a lot of this branch in focus and preserving some of the details. On the X-Series, you definitely do not. Clearly, this isn't this is not usable at all. You also have much more pleasing bokeh on the GFX as well. But we're also in the corner of the image. We're definitely pixel peeping. You know, it's not really a usable area. Let's take a look at this one-way sign. Again, I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit, just to be a little bit more fair for the X-Series. But yeah, it looks like I did nail the focus on both images on the top of the light, on the main actual part of the light, and not this one-way sign. So, you know, the X-Series version is definitely not in focus. I'm not sure if any of this is in focus at all. The GFX is obviously perfectly in focus, almost the whole sign. I could zoom in real quick. So we were at 33%. I mean, it looks pretty. I mean, maybe it's a little soft here. It's hard to tell, but looks to be the entire thing is hyper sharp and in focus. If we zoom in on the pole, that's too far. But if we zoom in on the pole, also this whole thing is in focus. We can read the numbers on the barcode, and even if we were to zoom in on this tag here, I mean, you could probably start to make out. I mean, it looks like some paint is on it or something, but super impressive. But to get away from the megapixel talk here, you obviously have much more of the subject, which is the pole, and this one-way sign in focus on the GFX versus the X-Series. That is clearly a very big difference, probably, you know, up there. The bokeh being a bit more smooth on the GFX, then number two is more of the subject is in focus, but that's not necessarily a lens thing. That is more of a medium format versus crop frame thing. So there we go. Let's take a look at the next image. This was the same exact location, just I shot the street instead of the pole. Right off the bat, you know, you'll see that obviously there's a difference in cars here, people walking, but overall it's decently close. It looks like the car here. I'm not going to say the focus point is exactly the same, but it definitely looks to be on this the other end of the street where it starts to go tilt upwards on both. I definitely did seem to get that. It looks like the car here on the left is more blurry on this left image versus the right. It looks like on the right side, this row of cars, they look to be pretty identical. Let's just zoom in a little bit. I don't want to ruin anything here, but maybe a little bit of a guess before. Yeah, I mean, you know, they look pretty close. It looks like maybe on the right side might be a little bit more out of focus, but let's get out of this. Let's take a look at the whole image, and I'm going to give you a couple seconds to kind of pick which one you think is which. All right, moment of truth. GFX on the left, X-Series on the right. Let's zoom in on the this part of the image. Again, I'm not sure how much we could push it on the X-Series, but yeah, what's interesting with this image specifically is that this whole strip in the middle, this whole street going upwards, is actually in focus, where on the GFX it really just looks like you have the bottom and just up to the speed bump right here. That is the really sharp part. That's kind of interesting, considering in the last image we had more of the subject in focus on the medium format versus the X-Series. But also this lens, this 250mm lens, I would equate it to working with a macro lens at some points, because sometimes you really just get like a blade of focus, a blade of the image in focus, and you really need to bump the aperture if you want to get the entire thing in focus. But let's take a look at, let's see, what else should we look at? Let's take a look at the trees up here. So, as you can see, this is not as much of a one-to-one, as the focus point is clearly slightly different, or we're dealing with the different lens characteristics making the focus point not line up. But if we take a look at the stop sign, clearly nothing is in focus here on the X-Series. Everything is, I'm not sure how much the focus point is. It's still, also we're dealing with wind too. It doesn't look like anything's in focus here. We just have more megapixels, and that kind of gives it, you know, the more data to look sharper. But, you know, if you really want to like one-to-one this, they are pretty similar. Pretty similar in this regard. You know, I don't think you could go wrong with either lens if you wanted to do a shot like this. I personally really love shots like this. Getting the compression on a longer lens definitely is very pleasing to me. All right, let's turn off this info and let's go to the next image. This was taken at Prospect Park, one of the bird statues in the entrance at the Grand Army Plaza. So let's just take a quick look at initial points. It looks like on the left side, it looks like more of the image is in focus. It looks like the tree is much sharper than the right. Also, this tree in the back also does look a bit sharper, as well as I would say the bird in the middle, the statue, they look pretty similar. Yeah, I think disregard the color. I think the color is a little bit more yellow here. That's just on me not lining it up 100%. But yeah, I'll give you a few seconds. Take a look and take your pick. All right, the moment of truth. The X-Series on the left and the GFX on the right, which is interesting. So let's zoom in on this bird. Let's just go to 50% on the X-Series. Oops. I'd say it's pretty close. And maybe that's not too far. No. Hard to get these to line up 100%. I'd say that's pretty close. So in looking at it at this distance, I think, you know, you have that medium format characteristic where, you know, you have the entire bird statue, the bird is on, and the bottom of the top of the base, you know, this entire thing is sharp. Whereas on the X-Series, it looks like the bird is just really sharp, and as the further down you go, the more of a drop off you get. But what is interesting is that the tree is just pretty sharp here as well. But like I mentioned previously, the drop off of the GFX is, you know, more again, I would equate it to being similar to a macro lens. Like if you have a lot of experience with the 80mm macro on the X series, not the 1.7 on the GFX, you know, you would definitely would be used to similar results where you get just a very small amount in focus. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, 100%. The X series, it's hard to push past 100%, although you can do it with the macro. Image on the GFX, because you can probably keep going and get even more in focus. But you know, I think you can't really go wrong with either. The GFX is obviously yields a much sharper image, and I think it is more of separation with this tree in the background. You also don't have, the entire bird is not hyper sharp, whereas on the GFX it is completely hyper sharp, and it's not like it's blurry or missed focus or anything. That's just you know, how the medium format sensor works. It's quite a beautiful thing. So if we keep going down, you'll see again the medium format is just sharp, so the entire subject is just hyper sharp. Let's just zoom in for fun. Let's just take a look at the how far we could go. So this is 100%. Yeah, let's keep it at 100. Yeah, I mean, you really get the whole texture of the bird, of the statue. Very sharp. We'll zoom in a bit more, but obviously can't really compete. But let's see, what else can we take a look at? Let's just take a look at this tree, for example. Obviously you have wind, so you are going to get some blur. It looks like it was more windy when I took the picture with the GFX, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely in an image like this, if you're paying for a, you know, 2.8 lens. I know on the X series 2.8 is not necessarily 2.8, but you know, you're paying for that extra aperture, that extra depth of field. You know, I think you would want, if you wanted to crop in something like this, you know, you really would want to see less of this tree in focus. You'd really want the focus to be more on this statue. You know, that's kind of the focus of it. And I think when you have the tree being sharp as well, even on the other side of the statue, you know, it's just not as high end of a look. It's not as pleasing. So I would definitely say, you know, in this scenario specifically, the GFX is definitely for the win. Also, I mean, I was pretty far away from this statue, but you know, this is the subject of the image. So yeah, that being said, let's hide this info and let's go on to the next image. All right, so I only did about 3 images to compare on the walk, but my main focus was really shooting the getting as many shots as I can with the 250 versus doing a comparison. But so later that night, I strung up one of my calibrated weights, and I set up a tripod, and I simply shot the image with in the exact same location. I just basically swapped the tripod out. I had 2 adapters, so it was just a simple take one off, put one on type of scenario. I lined these up to the best of my abilities in Photoshop, and here we are. So that being said, take a look. They look pretty similar. We'll get into the details, but for now, which one is which? All right, we'll turn the info on. You have the GFX on the left, the X series on the right. So right off the bat, these images have the exact same, you know, Lightroom presets. I applied the exact same color treatment, exposure, and all that type of stuff. You know, as you can see, you do have a different shutter speed. However, I kept the ISO as pretty much as low as possible, and the lowest aperture, of course, as well. So initially, the first thing we see is the background on the X series. It doesn't handle the color exactly the same. It looks like you have a little bit of, let me zoom in here. You know, you have a little bit of banding here, whereas it looks like the GFX just takes in more color. So you know, I probably took out the blues or something like that, and therefore you can see this missing color. So the background is definitely not as smooth, and we are definitely pixel peeping here. This is being extremely harsh and blunt. Both of these images are a bit noisy. This was shot indoors. I did have a light on this, but you know, it wasn't crazy lit. But if we're looking at the shadows, we zoom in here just a little bit, we can definitely see that again, you're getting a bit of banding, but it's not as smooth. You also get it on the GFX too. If you see here, a little bit of that purple banding, but it's much more apparent on the X series. All right, so let's see. It looks like I set the point of focus on this side at the G. So if we zoom in, as you can see on the X series, it just simply, this is at 100%. It does not really hold up. It's not usable at 100%. So let's just mount just a smidge. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look, it looks like the point of focus was like right here on the R. But obviously, without a doubt, like I'll try to match them just a little bit better. It looks like, you know, this is a scenario where the more megapixels definitely allows you to really crop in more and see more detail, but there's just simply no comparison between the texture of this plate versus the texture of this plate. If we zoom in more, we'll go into to this section. Let's keep it at 100. Keep it 100. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's more in focus here on the edge. You do get it. You can see where this texture is, but I think we're just falling short of the megapixels. I think the X series is the X50-140 is losing in this scenario sheerly due to the megapixels. So let's see, how's this band look? The band here, I mean, you can also tell you just have much more detail in this band versus this band. You know, the highlights looks about the same the way I edited it. You also have you can see the back where it looks like it's tearing a little bit, which I should get these bands replaced. Yeah, I mean, if you look at them zoomed out, it's pretty pleasing. It's really just when we zoom in, you know, the 50-140 does fall very short. But overall, I think to nitpick this image, like this, I'm blanking on the MSRP. I think the 50-140 is a $1,600 lens. The 250 is, I believe, a $3,300 lens. So literally for double the cost. Is it justified? Well, you are on different systems, but is it justified? Not really. I mean, in terms of for your average consumer or even average prosumer, depending on what you do, you know, yes, your background is smoother, but you're paying double the price. Is this double as smooth? I don't think so. I think they're pretty close. Man, I'm actually really enjoying this this heavy critique and pixel peeping. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do more videos like this. I'm definitely enjoying myself here. So here is the last image. Now I did two variations of this. I shot this fantastic subject of the GF23mm lens at f4 and f8. So on the, I didn't do a one-to-one, so I didn't offset for the crop factor and anything. I shot this on the 50-140, I shot at 2.8. On the 250, I shot at f4, and then I just moved both lenses up to f8. And I shot it again. So this is the open wide option. After this, we will look at a f8 version, just because everything else we looked at was at f4. So that being said, take a look. Tried to line everything up as best as I could, and I'll give you a couple seconds. Pick which one you think is which. All right, turn on the info. We have the GFX on the right, X series on the left. So let's zoom in at 67%. This side, oh, it's too far. So I don't know whether it was just, you know, the curse of being exhausted and trying to get in as much as I can before I sent this back, or something was weird. I'm pretty sure someone was doing laundry in the building, but I just had a lot of trouble getting the lens to focus. So the GFX one might be a smidge soft, I'm not sure. But if we take a look at this zoom level, pretty similar. Ironically, on the X-Series, you know, this looks like a bit more of it is in focus. Like you could make out the A here, whereas the drop-off rate is much heavier on the GFX. If we scroll, we move the images down. You can definitely see a higher level of detail here, as to be expected. But if we keep going down, again, it looks like you know, the X-Series, you definitely have more of these numbers in focus, and the GFX drop-off rate is much quicker, which is interesting again. Otherwise, you know, the level of detail on both, pretty good. If we look at the cap, again, pretty sharp. The caps look very, very close. I think the GFX is just a little bit softer here, but they're very close. If we go to zoom in at 100%, I mean, this looks pretty good. You know, you can't really, definitely cannot argue that, that result. This is at 100 on the X-Series. This is at 50% on the GFX. Like I said, this may be a smidge soft. One really cool feature on the GFX is you have a bit of tolerance. Like if your image is slightly soft, you have so many pixels, megapixels, that you don't have to hardcore zoom in, and you can kind of get away with it if you edit the image properly. But yeah, I mean, even here, like, you know, this number is just hyper sharp. Same as the GFX, of course, but can't really go wrong with the 5140. It is a phenomenal lens. And if we look down here, it almost looks like it's a little soft on the GFX. Looks like the 23 is sharp, and it looks like the Fujinon gets a bit soft, but not on the X-Series. More of that is in focus. Like, this goes back to what I'm saying, where the X-Series, or the GFX, is kind of like more of the subject will be in focus, but you have a much quicker drop-off rate than the X-Series. It also looks like just the way that I edited this, the color is just slightly different, so I'm not going to hardcore talk about that, but honestly, it looks like the background is pretty smooth on each. If anything, if we zoom into this stitching on this stool I had it on, pretty similar results. I mean, like I said, the GFX has a bit more, it just looks like it's just a little bit different blade of focus, distance-wise. If we go over to the other side, they look pretty identical. In the front, you have nice little dust bokeh balls. Can't go wrong with dust bokeh. But yeah, there we go. I'm going to load up the next image. Okay, here we are, the next image. Take a look, give you a few seconds, pick which one is which. All right, we got the 5140 on the left again. Let's just zoom in quick, take a quick look. So now both these lenses are at f8. Now these kind of start to look a bit closer. You still have a bit of a drop off, like the 16 is not hyper sharp, but it is on the GFX. And if you apply the crop factor, you're at f12 because you're at 1.5x. Let's just take a look at the drop off. I mean, even for f8, like, you know, you have a pretty quick drop off. Like basically you get almost the entire lens in focus. On the X-Series A, you could see what comes after the A. On the GFX, I mean, you know, from the 16 onward, it starts to drop off with focus, and you just simply don't have that on the X-Series, you know. But, you know, I should have shot this at f12. Maybe that would have been a bit more fair. But yeah, same sort of detail with the stitching on the front. That looks pretty identical. If we look at the other side of the lens, same thing. I mean, this a little bit, this whole side is not hyper sharp, but you know, much sharper than the GFX. And the top is very, has much more drop off than this. So we'll make this segment quick because I think this video is already super long, but it's for all you who want to really pixel peep and get to the bottom of which lens is on top. So, all right, I shot one of these scenes. Well, you only get to guess once. I'll cycle through each set of images because once you know, you're gonna know. Basically, I shot one of these scenes a while back, I think last year in 2021, and then the following this year with the 250mm on the GFX. The older set of photos are on the 5140. So this is one set. Take a look. Remember your choice. This is another set. The images are edited slightly different as well, so, you know, do your best. Then we'll look at some close-ups. All right, and last but not least, these images are kind of reversed. The nose is sharp in focus on this one, and the eyes are sharp in focus on this one, so it is what it is. You guessed that. I don't know how to unreject these. If you guessed that the image on the left, that shoot, was on the X series, you would be correct. So I think in this scenario, these are shot in the same street. It's just I shot in different directions. Both are just extremely pleasing. You really cannot go wrong with either option. Looks like the X series does, I mean, the GFX does blow out the background a lot more. However, I mean, it was snowing a lot harder, and I don't know, while, you know, you do get more of this, this wall and this gate, you do have that in both images. It looks like it's obviously a bit smoother on the GFX. You do have the higher drop off on the GFX. So I'll just zoom in a little bit, 25%, and I guess we'll do 50%, stick to that ratio, 67, 25. You know, I mean, you obviously have a lot more detail on the GFX, but I mean, both backgrounds are pretty pleasing. I think due to the more megapixels, the background will always look smoother on the GFX. Let's take a look at Duncan. I mean, it's really a toss-up here. I mean, the X series does look a tad bit grainier, but you know, and I think the focus point may not be his eyes. It may be a spot between his nose and his eyes, but like his ears are pretty sharp here. But in terms of backgrounds, I mean, it's pretty much a toss-up. I think the GFX is a little bit smoother, but it's really hard to say. I think, you know, you get that GFX effect where this plane, the eyes, a little bit in front of the eyes and the ears are all hyper sharp, and then you just get drop off in the back. The X series, the drop off is, I don't know, it looks like it's not as 100% as smooth, but I mean, it's really a toss up at this point. I think for a shot like this, you can't really go wrong with either lens and or system. Let's take a look at these. I mean, it looks like, you know, you have a bit more depth on the dog. It looks like he's even looking in a similar direction, just his head is tilted down on the right side. But yeah, in terms of, you know, bokeh wise, you can't really compete. However, I would probably say that this image is a mega crop and the X series is not. This is a full, pretty much a full shot. So that's pretty impressive. That's one of the best features of the GFX. the heavy crop ability. Same thing with Chief in this last shot. Again, we don't have the same exact focus, but background hyper smooth. This shot is a heavy crop, yet you have a very, very smooth background. On the other photo, again, it's not really a crop. So, you know, the whites are a bit blown out on this shot. I don't have the RAW pulled up. This is just a final JPEG. We are comparing JPEG to RAW, but nevertheless, you know, you have much more dynamic range on the GFX. But in terms of, you know, you really just cannot go wrong with either lens, in my opinion, when you're doing, you know, shots like this. I think the GFX is smoother. Is it double the price smoother? I don't think so. But you know, you can't buy the 5140 because it's cheaper and slap it on the GFX. It obviously does not work that way. So I think that you know, they're both top tier lenses. But with one last point I'll bring up, I think, you know, the 5140 is a much smaller lens. The GF250 is just a massive lens. But we'll talk about that more in the mega review coming up. Let's get to the outro. So there's the one-to-one comparison between the GF250 versus the XF50-140. X-Series users, what did you think? Primarily, I'm an X-Series user, and you know, I have been testing out the GFX for quite some time. But those of you who have never used a GFX system, you know, what are your thoughts? Did you find the bokeh truly incredible, or the sharpness, anything like that? Would you ever consider switching? I would love to know what your thoughts are. Also, I did a video on the GF110 versus 120 macro a while back, and that was primarily a studio review video where I used like a spindle thread as a subject. It was super technical. But what I didn't tell you guys is that I took, you know, the same picture with the 110 and then I swapped lenses. I used the 120, but I also used the XF 80mm macro for that as well. And I'm thinking, if you guys like this comparison between the GFX and the X series, I could pull up those files and do a comparison between the macro on the GFX system, the 120, versus the 80mm macro on the XF system, the X series system. So yeah, maybe I'll do that. Let me know if any of you would be interested in seeing that video. Up next, I have a video on a food photography shoot I did, kind of like behind the scenes, and then leading up to, I'll walk you through the files in Lightroom and the Pixel Peep, the final files. And I also have that mega review on the GF250 coming out. And I should have a 2-part review on the 23mm lens with some long exposure and stuff like that. So definitely stay tuned. So if you made it this far, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. I have some cool videos coming like I talked about. And also let me know your thoughts. I love having conversations with you guys. I love talking Fuji gear and camera gear. So shoot me a comment down below. And with that being said, I will catch you in that next video.